No. Hello and welcome, guys. Cyber Diaries podcast. We got episode number 14, and again we got two amazing guests in our podcast studio. So we got Ben and Thomas from Cytix. So I guess first of all, welcome, guys, and thank you for coming along.
Thanks for having us.
Welcome. Brilliant. I guess first of all, I know obviously you guys been doing a lot of work promoting obviously the organization and what you guys doing, but there's obviously going to be people in the audience who have never heard of what is Cytix. So I guess first of all, if we can start doing, sort of the inspiration journey, how Cytix came about and what was probably maybe the main cybersecurity challenges that you tried to address with creating a company.
Sure. So Tom and I, and I'm sure Tom will go into this in more detail later, but Tom and I have both got a long history in penetration testing, working for various vendors. And I guess in the sort of 5 years predating Cytix, we both started working for the same company. And more frequently, we were getting asked for things to be more continuous testing. I'm sure everyone listening has heard that term at some point or another. But we were coming at it from a pen testing perspective. And there are various companies offering what they call continuous testing from a pen testing perspective. But we didn't quite get the logic, right? We're running a business. Day rate consultancy is the model that's used, which is transactional in nature. And what is implied, and this is really important distinction, what is implied when we talk about continuous testing, right, is that everything will be tested all of the time, right? Now we know, or anybody that understands even the basic premise of security testing will know that that's not possible. But that doesn't mean we have an excuse for using the word continuous to mean we're just doing something some of the time, which seems to be what was around when we were looking at how other people were doing continuous testing, right? It would either be coming from a traditional perspective where we'd be doing a pen test twice a year and a scan monthly, or it could be something that's more continuous, coming from a sort of bug bounty freelancer perspective, where we've got a bunch of people looking at stuff every day. But what are they looking at? Where are they looking? Why are they looking? Right? They're not getting across everything every day. So we felt like in order to fix the problem of continuous testing, there needs to be something telling people where to look, right? If we can't do everything all the time, at least let's be strategic about what we're doing. So Cytix was formed. Me and Tom went out one night. I'm sorry to say that we got very, very drunk and hatched a plan. I may have come home and told my partner we were going to set up a business, and she put that in the bucket of many things Ben said when he's come home drunk. Yeah. Only to be shocked in the morning when the plan started getting executed. Thomas often says that she's never forgiven him since. And that's where it began, right? So we've effectively built a piece of technology, right? We're coming at this from a software perspective. We built a piece of technology that works out what's going on in businesses, right? What's changing? Because if we're honest, vulnerabilities don't appear by magic, although it can feel like that sometimes. They come from the result of an internal change, right? Obviously, tickets, pull requests, that sort of thing. Or an external change, right? A new vulnerability's come out in the wild. You were secure yesterday. You've changed nothing internally, but now you're insecure. But something has changed. It's just changed externally. So what our product does is it takes that data in, as much of it as we possibly can, and we turn it into something usable, right? We turn it into security testing actions. The idea being that if we can test more intelligently, then sorting out the output, things like vulnerability management, which I'm sure everyone will be familiar with. If we can test more intelligently, maybe we can then start to remediate and resolve things in a more intelligent fashion. So what do we spit out? Well, it's a series of testing actions off the back of the event. These testing actions can be automated. They can be manual. It really depends on the type of change that we're looking at. And that's effectively it. We have this, what we call our intelligence engine, takes event data in, spits out a list of testing actions on a continuous basis. And then the second part of our product actually orchestrates those actions, right? So we'll tell your Tenable scanner to run that scan. We'll tell your SaaS tool to run that scan. And we'll also create a manual action if necessary for a human to look at this part of this system for these vulnerabilities.
So brilliant. So if I understand correctly, it's sort of, it's probably would be too primitive to say it's an orchestration engine, but it's like it's something that connects the pieces of whether it's manual, whether it's scanner, and it kind of aggregates. Because I guess the problem where, and I'm just coming from sort of experience as well. If we look at sometimes penetration testing is usually used as an assurance for products. So, for example, I may be providing specific app or service, say a B2B. Normally, during due diligence, they will ask, "Oh, can you send us a penetration testing report?" Now, in the compliance world, as long as the penetration test is not over 12 months old, that assures that my product has been tested. Now, we all know that if you do a proper business sort of development, every 2 weeks or even nowadays, probably people are releasing code daily. So obviously what happened 11 months ago does not even closely represent how that application is looking like. So if we can connect those pieces and actually continuously assure that product, it probably gives a better picture of where that product is in terms of vulnerability state.
100%. I mean, this is, I've almost fallen out with the term pen testing, right? Because penetration testing has been closely associated now with compliance, right? What we're talking about is not that type of pen testing.
Yeah.
What we're talking about is what pen testing should be, which is it's just a manual test. Why do we use manual tests in 2024? To do the things that tools can't, right? So if we're looking at application security, we can run a tool if a change, say for example, we fiddled with the authentication workflow in a web app. We know that a good portion of the vulnerabilities that could have introduced, tools are damn good at finding, and they should be used for that purpose. But we also know with this type of change specifically, there's a tendency to introduce business logic flaws. Now, we know that humans, generally speaking, are far better at finding business logic flaws than tools are. So we need to create an action for a human to look at this part of this system for business logic flaws. That human can be someone you employ in the business. That human can be someone from a bug bounty company. That human could be from your pen testing provider. But we're not talking about pen testing in the way that it's currently used. We're talking about it in the truest context, right? It's a human. And why do we need humans? Well, it's to do the things that tools can't. So it's about finding that balance. And if people want to understand truly what vulnerabilities this change could be introducing, then you need to look at what vulnerabilities it could be introducing and then working back from that to see which methods are best at discovering those vulnerabilities. And that's what the Cytix product is trying to achieve.
Yeah, brilliant. I guess, obviously, before we delve too much deep in a product, I wanted just to kind of reverse back into that journey where, company came about. I really love, exploring sort of co-founders' ideas and the first steps into entrepreneurship or business. I'm a big fan, and I spoke to a few people now who know, Ross Haliluk and his new book that recently came out, Cyber for Builders, which kind of showcases a lot of, aspect how VCs operate, how PEs operate, all of that, things that normally, whether you are a CISO, whether you are a pen tester, you would never been exposed to in terms of business creation, and when you start to raise capital, whether how do you open these specific doors. So how for you guys was that journey? Because obviously 5 years ago that book did not exist, and creating business, two people, you started plans with a pint, which obviously are the best way to create plans. But then how the steps evolved from there, and how was your journey? So sort of 5 years is a long time now.
Yeah, go on, Tom. I can see you itching to answer that one.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot in that question. It's really hard to say now, 2 years on from obviously where we first started. I think we started in an interesting position in that we were quite fortunate. We were regularly being asked to produce something, as opposed to us having to go out and find a problem that we had to solve. We were being told that there was a problem, and in fact, some people were even asking us for what they imagined to be the solution. I'll admit that what our solution is now is not what the solution that we originally had a conversation with people about building, because we had to have internal conversations about whether or not actually, it's the classic Henry Ford, like if I'd have asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. So I mean, our first our first imagination was effectively just to allow people at an organization to send a message to us at any point when they felt like they needed something testing, big or small, and then we would be able to quickly spin up and provide them with the testing resources needed in order to do that. We then had conversations with organizations where they said, you know, that's not scalable enough for the problem inside my business. And so we had to go away, we had to reimagine, and scalability has never been a problem when we ran a consultancy, because, you know, it's just not something that you think about. You sort of, you live inside this small little confine where you are limited and you accept those limitations. But when you're building a SaaS product, you actually have to start imagining how this could work for 100,000 people, 200,000 events a day, that kind of extent. So yeah, I mean, it was an interesting journey. I don't think we've solved all of the problems in that respect yet. But I mean, Ben, you're more at the coalface when it comes to navigating the sort of the investment side of this world and the challenges we've gone through there. What's your take?
I mean, I think you summed it up quite well. I think the way that fundamentally the most frustrating part about being a founder, for me anyway, is that when you look where you are and you look back at where you started, it feels like half as much work as you've actually put in, because you haven't gone and you're looking back in a straight line, whereas you come in a huge zigzag fashion. And that is so frustrating, right? Especially when you're supposed to be reflective and you're supposed to think about learning experiences, and you're like, I don't really want to look back because all I see is all of these random directions that we've been in. You know, all you've got to do is look at subdomains for Cytix to see how many different areas we've been to.
That's the most important probably lessons that you learn, because obviously, you know, I'm not saying you're doing over, but you know, there is usually, you know, founders and stuff like that, they get to a certain level and obviously they either exit or something, you know, or they merge, or you know, you move on and normally they create another business. And then, as I sometimes say, you know, you can't, nobody can teach you those lessons unless you experience them. And you might say it's a zigzag, but I assume the zigzag allowed you to be where you are, because sometimes you can do, you know, you go up and you go down, and loads of people will stop when they're down. When, you know, you're just persevering, how the same as, you know, how there is images where people are digging and there is diamonds behind, you know, the last dig sort of, and then you walk away. I just wanted to pivot into another thing that kind of always reminds me. So I was at the event yesterday, and I get to always talk and compare and contrast, I guess, cultures between UK and US. And I guess the one thing that really sticks out is UK is not very entrepreneurial sort of spirit as such, because whenever, you know, you say someone you're going to start a company, you either become a laughing stock, or, you know, as people, you know, say, you know, oh, you know, it's too hard, you're never going to succeed. Whereas whenever I'm talking to people from US, whenever you say, oh, I'm creating a business, US people had a sort of that rally, like, oh, amazing, you go, you know, how I can open the doors for you so you be successful. Whereas UK feels a bit, I don't know if you guys experienced that sort of different sort of landscape.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of take a slightly different perspective to most things, right? I take the perspective ultimately that the world owes you nothing.
Yeah.
And that, you know, expect nothing, and then when something comes, it's a surprise, but when nothing comes, it's kind of what you wanted. But yeah, I mean, I've not been to the US. I can't speak for it. I try not to read into the headlines too much, because having been a founder, I can't imagine that it's as simple as you live in the US, or, you know, you come out of Unit 8200 or something, and then all of a sudden you genuinely do have those checks. I'm sure if you really looked into it, there'd be countless founders with great ideas that are struggling in those places and with that background. You know, it can't be that easy, surely. But yeah, we struggle. I mean, building cybersecurity products out the UK, it's a service-led economy. There are some notable examples. You know, ironically, there used to be lots more. You know, you've only got to look as far as Knutsford to find companies like Portswigger that have done exceptionally well as a product. But we are a services economy. There aren't bags of cybersecurity VCs leaning in. And the problem with normal VCs, because we have quite a lot of sort of tech VCs, But cybersecurity is almost like an orange flag from the get-go, right? It's a cost center. I can't walk into a meeting with an investor and tell them I'm going to make the company that buys my product, X dollars this year. I might be able to talk about them saving money, but from the CISOs that I speak to, most of the time they're after a security improvement over anything. And that's quite difficult for tech investors to get their head around, right? Because you're not making or saving someone money per se. You are indirectly, but not directly.
Yeah, I think it all depends as well, because I've been talking like in a conference recently as well. It's as a CISO sometimes, and I think that's a really sort of a skill and a development where I think where the sort of industry is taking place now is, as you say, security has always been viewed as a cost center. Now it depends what narrative you create.
Yeah.
Now, say for example, as I say, I'm currently working in a sort of B2B organization where we're providing services or platforms to our clients. Now, in the product assurance space, obviously saying that I improve this product security, therefore I protect our customers' data, and I always tie in. So, for example, if you can tie in security into how it's going to reduce risk and improve resilience, that's saving money. If you can quantify that, so that spend can neglect whatever you're spending on security tools. And then secondly, any spend that speeds up business development activities, RFI response, RFP response, it creates a value stream. So security can be an enabler, and it's about, I think, how you communicate that stuff.
100%. 100%. However, that is an emerging way of thinking that good CISOs are managing to convince their boards is true, and I agree with it. But I still think if you polled the top 10,000 CEOs in the world and asked them if security is a cost center, I still think you'd be fairly unhappy with the current outcome in terms of the general view. Ask them in 5 years, and I think we'll be more on that path. But I still think we live in a world where outside of the security bubble, it's a tricky conversation to have, and the we're not necessarily winning the fight everywhere for that case.
Yeah, it's a journey. I think it's it's culture change. The journey. It's not something that happens overnight. Same as if you look at back a couple of years ago, CISOs used to be in charge of securing IT. Now the CISO's remit are changing. You got HR data, you got finance data, you got applications all across every single department. So you can't just focus on IT. You have to secure the whole business. I think we talked a bit about testing, and I guess moving away from sort of legacy vulnerability assessment. There are lots of organizations, especially small organizations, who are shipping products, shipping code, and doing their development lifecycle. So I guess how does Cytix integrate into existing development lifecycle to be able to ensure to do that continuous testing?
I'll let Tom do the techie bit in a minute, but I think just from a very high level understanding, we're really good at security testing inside the pipeline, right? That's kind of a solved problem. We've got things like, I think there's probably 9 different types of scanner, or there's 9 sort of recognized technologies now, from a container scanning, secret scanning, SAST, SCA, DAST, dare I say, towards the end. Pretty good at that pipeline stuff. It's what happens when stuff gets out of the pipeline, right? That where Cytix really starts to come into its own. Because as soon as we sort of start releasing stuff, maybe we DAS scan it monthly, because DAS scanning in isolation is pretty difficult. And then maybe we pen test it annually or more frequently if it's a regulated app. And we do so in the confines of compliance, typically. So we're not getting a proper test. That's really where Cytix comes in. So ultimately, if we're looking at, we talk about this a lot in the VM space, if we're looking at things like exploitability, right? If we're looking for what is the real risk, if someone came onto my app, what can they actually do? That's where Cytix starts to coordinate the tools that are best used at that space, the various different DAS technologies, the various different cloud scanning technologies at that sort of runtime space, and folding in the manual testing where specific. I'll let Tom answer in a more techie fashion, but that's how I see it.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of how we work inside existing workflows, especially inside development teams, I think the place to look is to, on our journey, one of the key things that we've learned is that the engineering and the development workflows that already exist cannot be disrupted. They are far more business critical than security processes. So trying to shoehorn in a security process inside a development process is risky business if what you're doing is changing that original workflow. So we had to look at what is already being produced as part of these workflows that we could tap off of to actually then provide value. And effectively what we figured out was that engineers and developers are producing brilliant pieces of intelligence in their day-to-day role. Like every single ticket that gets written that describes a new change, a new feature or functionality or API endpoint or whatever else it is an incredibly valuable piece of information for a security tester to look at, because that tells them exactly where they should be looking and they can infer from that exactly what they should be looking for, right? If you get a new API endpoint, you know that you should be looking at that API and you should be looking for SQL injection across site scripting or functional access control issues. Whereas if you get a new form field, you might be looking for automation controls and things of that element. So by tapping off of those systems, that means engineers and developers can just continue in their normal software development process, and we can be just sitting beneath the surface, listening to what they're doing, observing it, and being able to make decisions off of the back of that, use our pen tester noses to say, this smells like it might have something interesting in it. And most of the time, there isn't anything worth looking at, right? Most of the time, they're updating the size of a font or they're changing some copy or something like that. And those few times there are a lot of that, we can say, but I know an automated tool is perfectly good at this. Either they've got SAST and DAST inside their pipeline, or I'm going to orchestrate some particular scan profile that's specific to this. And then in the few occasions where something actually interesting and potentially significant is being introduced in terms of security vulnerabilities, then we can pull down from those tickets and say, okay, I'm going to pick this one up, I'm going to assess this one manually, or I'm going to create an action for somebody to assess this one manually, and then actually start carrying out that work.
Yeah, I think obviously, Thomas, because you are quite techie, I guess a question I wanted to ask, we always talk, and we just alluded to, is normally when you're talking about, for example, development lifecycle, we talk about mainly security is about the code, is about static scanning, dynamic composition analysis. There's rarely actually people, or sometimes people forget, or sometimes people maybe do not comprehend, like the importance of the integrity of the build and delivery environments. So are you guys embedded in any way to test actually the integrity of the environments? Because you can test any code you want, you can detect all the vulnerabilities, fix them. But if there is a flaw in your deployment environment and the malicious actor can inject malicious code, it's gone past all your scans already.
Yeah, no. So most of the testing that we do is at runtime, because it means that we're able to test the entire environment and we're not just focused on the code base itself, right? The opportunity to be able to actually understand how various different things interact with each other means that we can actually find vulnerabilities that you couldn't conceive of if you just looked at everything in isolation, which is effectively what you're doing when you're looking at code level. Not to say there isn't massive value in looking at code level, because you've got greater visibility, right, of what's going on beneath the surface. But yeah, our ability to be able to observe what's happening at code level and see what's being produced by the automated tools and scans and what's included within these tickets, and then transfer that knowledge of what potential vulnerabilities may have been introduced into testing that we can then orchestrate at runtime, means that we get the sort of complete picture, and we get to actually test we get to identify what the impact of those changes genuinely is in a real world scenario, not necessarily just what the theoretical impact of that change might be in complete isolation.
Brilliant. And then obviously, I know I was exploring a bit your platform, and obviously you guys are using AI powered, so sort of AI now enable security testing. So how does that differentiate now from what traditional methods are people using out there?
Yeah, so from an AI standpoint, where we're heavily focused, right, is on the idea that we can use things like LLMs to take away the role of what is typically done in business by a product manager, maybe a security engineer. I mean, we've all been there, right? So security teams will naturally have an interest in what's changing in the business and will naturally have an opinion on it. Tom referred to it earlier, a pen tester's nose, right? We've just done this change. They will have a higher level understanding, at least from hearing that, of okay, what could the risks be? And then once you understand what those risks are, you can come up with suggested actions to either understand those risks more or mitigate against them or whatever. What we're trying to do with our LLMs is effectively tune them to be able to replicate a pen tester's nose. So we can use LLMs to actually read tickets, and then make decisions on classifying what type of change it is, classifying what potential vulnerabilities it could introduce, and then make decisions off the back of that around what tools / humans need to be orchestrated. Tom, I'm sure you can use some more longer words to say the same thing.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what I was going to say. All I would be doing is using longer words to say that same thing. None of these things are independently of each other particularly sort of particularly complex things to solve. You know, being able to figure out what a ticket is in terms of a class of change, that's not hard. Being able to figure out what kinds of vulnerabilities might be introduced by a particular class of change, once you've built up the database of the kinds of vulnerabilities associated with each of these classes, again, that's not hard. And then being able to say this tool's good at finding these vulnerabilities, and this tool's good at finding these vulnerabilities, and tools aren't good at finding these ones, so people are good at finding them. Again, these are all very, very sort of very low level quick decisions that we make instinctively as security people whenever we're talking about a change or whenever we're looking at a system. All that a large language model is doing is replicating that same reasoning as we're doing, but being able to do it at massive scale so that you don't have a person reading through the 1,000 tickets that a development team have pushed through their Jira or their GitHub or whatever it is each week, but you still know that all of them are being looked at and all of them are being processed.
And we're still not there from a so at least our interpretation of from what customers are telling us and what people are telling us around AI and security, right, and allowing this new technology to start taking away some of the low-level decision making that's being made in security organizations, which quite often are, security teams and enterprises are quite often quite heavily staffed. And if you ask the security people in those businesses, are you doing security work? You quite often don't hear that, right? So I spoke to one guy who I think he referred to about 15 of their staff as the debt collectors. These are highly trained security people, but they're effectively just chasing devs, providing additional context sometimes. They're not doing the security work they want to be doing because they're on this hamster wheel, right, of scanning and fixing stuff. So what Cytix is well, yeah, what we're doing from an AI perspective quite often isn't necessarily completely automating that work using LLMs because the market's not really ready for it yet. I don't know what you think, Marius. You can come on to it in a second, but I'm not hearing security leaders saying that AI has revolutionized their processes yet. It's quite often we're yet to see the impact. But what we're doing more often than not is providing a suggested action, right? So rather than the product manager or the developer having to book that meeting with security to discuss the change and work out the plan and then execute the plan manually by running the tool yourself or ringing the pen testing company, Cytix, you simply log into Cytix and Cytix shows you with the little magic wand that everyone's got for AI now, shows you this is the plan we suggest. You agree, and the plan happens. No product manager conversation needs to happen. No calls need to happen. No scan needs to be clicked to run. That's where we are with it, and that's where our audience, our customers, whatever you want to call them, are more comfortable right now.
I think I got a similar viewpoint. Like I've been lately, I did some open security summit conversations, and obviously talking with Dennis Cruz. He's very heavily now. I think he's like 100% speed into AI, and I was like, you have to be. I'm a bit more cautious, even though I love AI. But I think for me, as you say, I foresee more AI, and I love more AI in terms of it being able human to provide context and to sort of build a picture out of the data instead of to make a decision. I don't want to remove decision making from humans because, as you all know, for example, simple examples. Now, everyone says that, you know, self-driving cars might not be possible, and that's where the problem is, because you letting AI to make decisions, and there's so many variables that it can't do that human intelligence. Whereas it's amazing at sifting through so much data and providing you a context. So what you want, for example, you want SOC to be able, when there's alert, get all the data and provide you so much, information that you can make a decision on a snap. And that's, I guess, that's for me, that's what's really powerful. You empower people to do more with their time instead of trying to replace them.
Yeah, I think so far the general feeling around AI and security is one that it's given every security team more work because everyone else in the business is trying to implement it, and they're like, "Fuck, we need to secure this." But they're not seeing the efficiencies in their team because security companies haven't got that good at using AI yet, or the trust isn't there, or for whatever reason you can give. So they've almost AI's given them more work, but it hasn't taken work away from them. So it's not, the balance isn't there yet. But I also believe that security teams, like every team now at board level in these companies, boards are asking their executive teams, how are we implementing AI to stay ahead of the competition? How are we using AI to bring out new services? And security has to report to that also. So I've no doubt at all that security is also feeling the pressure to find ways to use AI, but do so in a way that is improving things and not actually adding more risk.
Now, if we delve a bit deeper into, obviously, I plugged in Cytix, and obviously, I assume your AI, obviously, you guys are using some sort of threat intel to obviously see what's in the wild happening. Because obviously, if we circle back to some of the things like Log4j and things like that, where people really struggled, they knew that they might had some, but actually they struggled to contain it or to even detect it. So how can Cytix help to contain and to detect some of the things that are actually happening, across our environments?
Sure.
Sure.
So we maintain or tap off of an existing catalog of what assets you've got, right? So if you've got applications, infrastructure, cloud environment, that is information that we need to know about. So when we're getting these events, we're able to orchestrate the tools and associate them with the right things. We're building that context up. And as part of a lot of the tools and a sort of byproduct, a lot of the testing that we do, we're able to actually enrich this catalog with a lot of information about what software versions are installed, what configurations are deployed across the estate. What that then means is that when a new CVE is published or a new TTP is being announced and discussed, we can effectively receive that just as another kind of event. So rather than a ticket or a pull request or something of that nature, we can receive a notification that says this is a new vulnerability in the wild, that we then know, okay, there are all of these different assets that have or potentially have that version of the software installed, and we can orchestrate the tools or the manual tests that are needed to be able to determine whether or not it's an exploitable issue or instance of an issue or not.
And then so what makes us special here, right? Because you don't have to look very far to find someone that says, if you had our product, Log4j wouldn't happen, or something to that effect. What makes us special is that everybody else that's saying it has a scanner, typically, right? So they have a scanner and they've probably got an ASM product, and that's how they're able to tell you. We know what assets you have and what the underlying technology is. So therefore, we can identify instances of Java, for example, and we can deploy our scanner to look for them. Cytix is very, very similar in that we retain an asset log and we understand the vulnerabilities come out. The only difference here is that we aren't a scanner, right? What we're going to do is, off the back of that event and understanding that that event affects you, is make a decision on these are the series of tests you need to do in order to check to see if you're affected by this vulnerability. It's a scan here, it's a scan there, and it's probably a manual look here if needed. We've created that list of actions, and then we will tell your scanners to go and do those things, or you can use a list of proprietary scanners that we've put in and we've put wrappers around. But effectively, you're not with Cytix, whilst we're not a scanner, you're not limited by the capabilities of that scanner.
Yeah, brilliant. Now, I guess, do you guys see or currently engaging the customers? Do you see specific, sector that would be benefiting the most, or that's pretty much sort of sector or industry agnostic where you guys are kind of helping customers across?
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely seeing more traction with businesses that change more frequently. We've been dragged in a more AppSec direction. Our product doesn't need to be like that. Our technology works across cloud. It can even work across traditional infrastructure, but software-heavy businesses, cloud native, lots of changes. It tends to be where we thrive. The other interesting perspective, if you start to look at Cytix from the context of we can do a pen test, and then we can put Cytix in to manage that baseline. So consider pen testing as a baseline. We've tested everything. We now understand the security of the system at this moment in time. Then we look at putting a product like Cytix in to manage that line and understand that we always have a baseline. If you start to think of it like that, it becomes a different conversation, because if you're a 500 staff business that spends 30 grand a year on security testing, well, look, the manual tests, we might be coming up with 3 or 4 tests a day, of which 80-90% of them are automated. And then we're folding in the manual testing where necessary, but we're not folding it in the context of you need a 3-day pen test of this app. We're folding it in saying you need to look at this input field in this application for business logic flaws. That's 4 hours work, right? So the cost of putting in a continuous testing program for a sort of middle of the road change business might only come out at, say, 10% more expensive than what they're paying for their annual test. And if you start to look at frameworks like 27001, which these businesses are compliant to, etc., they require you to do regular security testing, and it implies manual. It doesn't say an annual pen test. So when you start to look at this, okay, when I go back to my auditor, do I want to show them that we did a pen test 11 months ago? Or do I want to show them needed to do because of what we did as a business? And flip this around another way. When any stakeholder asks for a report, and this goes back to our point earlier about security not being a cost center and being at the forefront of the value proposition, if I come to you and or you come to me and you say, will you buy my software? And I'm you for a second, Marius, I'm the CISO here. And I say, okay, but let me see the testing history. And you go away and you get me an 11-month-old pen testing report. I'm like, okay, that shows me that you do the bare minimum. Nothing wrong with that, but it shows me that you do the bare minimum. But if you turned around to me when I asked for a report and you said, okay, how much testing history would you like to see? And which assets would you like that to cover? And then you went away and got me a custom report. What does that actually tell me? Well, that tells me that this system's held up under scrutiny for 5 months or 6 months or 8 months, however much history you've showed me. And that, for me, is how, if you've got a software product and it's rivaling another software product and you want to get your edge and you can't come up with any more features because you've done them all already, right? I can think of many products like this that they're just a carbon copy of their competitors. Security is a really good one. And I think that, you know what it's like being a CISO. Would you not be taken aback a little bit if someone showed up with a pen testing report and it showed you that this system's had manual scrutiny over the last 12 months and this is what was found, fixed, discovered in that time? It gives you that that confidence beyond that.
I think it's, as you say, it's absolutely. I think especially, that's why I kind of alluded to earlier that sometimes in the business where you are, say, down to last 3 and features and costs are similar, the security differentiation can be the winning factor.
Yeah. And put it this way, I'm a football fan, right? I go and watch Manchester United. If I go and watch Manchester United on the first game of the season and write a report on the quality of the team after that game, and you asked me 9 months later, Ben, how good are Manchester United? And I got that report out from 9 months earlier, probably 2 managers in that time, and God knows how many transfers and games. You'd laugh me out the room. You'd be like, this is literally like, you don't understand football if you think that this is an accurate representation of a team. And yet we do this in security all the time, right? If you wanted my opinion on Manchester United, you'd expect me to take you on a bit of a story on the past 6 months, give you a balanced opinion on how things have performed from start to finish. And that's how we'd operate. And I don't see security or business changing any slower than a football team, right? We're all moving at these ridiculous paces to get that edge. And, it's just trying to understand the context and the situation.
And I guess we're reaching now to the culmination of the question that is, can we actually truly achieve the fully automated security testing?
Tom?
Fully automated security testing. I don't see it. I don't think that fully automating is the way forward. I do think that we will hand over a lot of responsibility to automation, but when it comes to context, I think there's 2 reasons why we probably won't hand up over fully automation. The first one is that the context that we as security people can apply when we are doing certain types of tests. There's loads and loads of vulnerabilities that can be found using automation where they're effectively a binary of it's either there or it's not, and therefore tools can find it. But then there's also vulnerabilities where it's, I understand that this system is supposed to behave in this way because that's what the business's objectives are, whereas it's behaving in a different way, and that is therefore a vulnerability for the business, even though in a different context, that wouldn't be a vulnerability because the business has different objectives. So I think people will always be responsible for a level of security testing as a result of that. But I think the other thing as well is that we have the opportunity, and we've not always been that brilliant at this, but as security testers, to interact more with the development team in order to help them perform their best, right? And I don't think that security tools are necessarily the way to solve that problem. I think that actually us working together as a community of people, and us building relationships with engineering and development teams where we say, I've worked through the information within this tool, my interpretation of it is this, I understand what you're doing and what your responsibilities are, and here's how I would suggest that you consider applying, or let's have a conversation about how we can apply some measures so that you avoid introducing kinds of vulnerabilities in the future, means that I think that that'll actually be adopted by development teams much better than a tool that just spits out a bunch of output.
And I think I'm a big fan. I sometimes, however, I always talk. We often talk about tool integration into some things like Jira and stuff like that. The problem, I guess, I'm more and more seeing is that if you plug in Cytix and you just push Jira tickets to developers, it doesn't breathe collaboration, and I'm sure it doesn't work. And I think, as you say, the more we can build on the culture and collaborate and actually use tools where we invite developers to actually have access to those tools so they can self-serve and coach them how they can serve, I think that would be probably more even beneficial. But I guess I wanted just to kind of last few minutes to round it off. I want look into the next 12 months, what's on the roadmap, how you guys see, Cytix building and evolving the testing sort of product roadmap. Is there anything specific that you guys are working towards?
Yeah, I think from a product roadmap perspective, we are working quite closely now with a few select partners. These are human testing companies, all sorts of different types and flavors, be they sort of bug bounty platforms, traditional consultancies. And what we're looking to really do here is take the existing relationships they've got with their customers to do the sort of baseline testing and be able to use Cytix as a piece of technology that allows the customer to keep doing what they're doing, the pen testing company to keep operating in the way that they're operating, but Cytix to sit in the middle of those two entities and do what it's supposed to do. Makes it a little bit easier than the customer having to go and have that conversation with their testing company once they've identified Cytix. So a lot of work going into that. a hell of a lot more integrations. Any startup you've had on the podcast that's integration centric, I'm sure will have the same challenge. What we're asking these integrations to do in security is a lot in a lot of cases. So you can't really get the benefit usually of these sort of integration platforms and these sort of hacky ways of doing it. You've got to build these things natively so you can make them do all the things you need them to be able to do. So, you know, we're at about 30 integrations now. We need about 100 to be at a critical mass. So you've just got to keep going and going and going. You know, from a collaboration perspective, we've got all your big ticketing systems, you know, your Diaries, your ADOs, your ServiceNows. But just think how many security scanners there are, code repos, communications tech. There's a lot that you need to get through. And then we'd love to start folding in things like CM data in as well as a number of the, you know, there's threat intel that comes from the likes of MVD, but then you've now got many different threat intelligence feeds that a business already has, right? So we're not interested in paying CrowdStrike, for example, for their threat intel for us.
Yeah.
But if we're going into a business and that business says, hey, we already pay for these 3 feeds, and those 3 feeds are really useful to us for our product, we want to be able to allow the customer to hook those in and benefit from having those things also hit the intelligence engine to work out if there's an impact to the testing program, not the defensive program, but we can use it for the testing program.
Yeah.
So lots and lots of integrations. Tom?
Yeah, I mean, just making ourselves more intelligent, right? The main thing that we need to be as good at as we possibly can be is being as specific as we possibly can be about classifying each change that occurs or each event that we receive, about getting as specific as we can be in terms of the kinds of vulnerabilities that those might introduce, and then being as refined as we can be in orchestrating the tools so that they are looking for those kinds of vulnerabilities, and in orchestrating the people so we can leverage people less and less and free up more and more of their time to be spent doing the things that they want to be doing. So just building on that is fundamental to what we do and to making ourselves scalable, but it's also fundamental to the value that we end up providing at the end of the day.
And then I guess lastly, guys, to round it all up, you know, there's some brilliant product development. I guess, you know, if any of our listeners and audience, you know, are resonating with the problems that you guys are solving, how they can, you know, approach, whether they can book a demo, how can they see your tool in action, how they can, you know, get to know more, you know, outside of obviously just looking at the website.
100%. Well, I mean, I was going to start with that because we've just got a brand new website. So feel free to check that out. There's everything on there should be as up to date as it possibly can be. Some great platform diagrams on there to really sell the story of why we exist and the value. We're going to be announcing a few webinars over the next couple of weeks, just to put them in. These are going to be opportunities to add to your product research if you're looking to do that. And we appreciate not everyone in 2024 just wants to jump straight on a sales call. So we'll be putting a few webinars in. But if you want to speak to my lovely self and maybe even get some FaceTime with Tom, then feel free to just use the book a demo link on the website. That'll allow you to book a 30 or 45-minute meeting. Literally, you'll never get a hard sell from us. We're here to provide you with information to allow you to make an educated decision on whether you see value or not. That's all it is. So
yeah,
that's what you should do.
I'd add to that as well, or just reach out to us directly on you know, LinkedIn or channels like that. You know, we're at the end of the day, what we need at the moment, what's most important to us, is people who are interested in sitting down and having a discussion with us, both about what it is that we believe we should be doing, but also what you believe we should be doing. You know, having that and being able to work together towards this end goal of a solution that's able to solve lots and lots and lots of problems, means, yeah, getting that conversation in there is valuable for us as much as anything.
Yeah, as you know, as Ross said in his book, you know, experiment. So, you know, the earlier you let your baby fly and actually let customers to give you feedback, the more you can address their problems and the better you can engage with it. But, you know, guys, really thank you so much for coming along. You know, another amazing episode and really interesting conversation about continuous testing, how we can actually merge and address the problems that are, you know, are currently out there in the industry. So thank you very much for coming along, Thomas and Ben.
Awesome.
Thanks for
Thank
having
you
us.
so much, Maria, for your own time. And thank you to your lovely audience.